That's it. Grab your cacodemons and get comfy. We're going on a ride. Hi everybody, Carla here, and I know I've been kind of out of it for a little while, but no worries, I'm back for now. Still very busy, so I'm doing my best, but I just finished reading The Court of the Dead by Riordan and Oshiro, and I had to come here and talk about it because I have a lot to say. This book was a lot. Let's just put it that way. And I really, really, really needed to come here and talk about it. Okay? Yeah, this book is about 400 pages long. I have the Aussie version, the paperback, of course. I got it, I think, a day after it released, just because that's when I could manage to go to the bookstore. And I read it in about 10 days. Because I like to pace myself, okay? It's not that I can't read more, it's that if I read stuff like in one sitting, I forget about it, and I don't like that. It stays with me more if I pace myself as I read. So I read it, took me about 10 days, and it is, in case you didn't know, it's the sequel to The Sun and the Star, which was the first book in the Nico the Angelo adventures. This is the second one. I hope there will be more, but for now there's only those two. If you've been with me for a while, you know that when I read, I like to highlight my favorite passages. I don't like annotate. I think that's a bit much for me personally. Fine if you do, but like for me, I just want to remember my favorite lines and my favorite moments, so I highlight them. Just one highlighter, just the one color. I don't need to like organize it, categorize it or anything, but I just want to have them marked so I can find them more easily. If I ever reread or if I ever just need to look for one specific line or whatever. I like highlighting my favorite passages, but I don't highlight them as I read. I highlight them after I'm done usually. So as I read, what I do is that I dog-ear the pages. I know, I can hear you screaming from here. It's okay. It's okay. Trust me. I dog-ear the pages where my favorite quotes are, and then after I'm done reading the book, then I highlight them. I go through it with a highlighter. Just want to say it took me about an hour and a half to actually go through this whole thing with a highlighter, because look, can you see? Like, that's how much I actually marked. That's like a whole third of the book right there. Like, I highlighted so much stuff. Did I mark every time Nico and Will interacted in this book? You can't prove that. In all seriousness though, I didn't highlight every single instance of it, just most of them, because I am hopeless. But yeah, there's much more to it than just Solangelo fangirling. Like, I really like this book. I'm gonna spoil this video for you right off the top. I adored this book so much. Like, gods know I love my Titan's Curse and my House of Hades. Like, I even really love The Sun and the Star. But guys, I am so serious when I say this. This might be the best book in the entire Camp Half-Blood Chronicles. And I don't say that lightly, because I think the Chronicles as a whole have been pretty damn good. But, you know, there are some books that I love more than others, but this one, like, literally just pole vaulted all the way to the top of my list. I was about halfway through the book. Like, the Court of the Dead had not even been introduced yet, and I was already thinking, this is the best book Rick has ever written. And you know what? By the time I finished it, that opinion had only solidified in me. Because, like, this book is so good, y'all. Like, I can't even put it into words how good it is. So, I'm gonna talk about everything in this book. Be warned, there will be spoilers.
Danger, Will Robinson! Danger! No, Will Robinson! Danger!
If you haven't read it, well, first of all, like, get thee to a freaking bookstore or just buy it on ebook. I don't care, but read it. Read it now. I am so serious. It's so good. Listen. I am a veteran of fandoms. Have like going around online fandoms since I was 12. It's been a long time. I know the fandom is probably out there complaining about something regarding this book. Like, there's always something, right? I haven't checked. I don't want to check. Honestly, I am so like high off this book that I don't want anything to bring it down for me. So I haven't checked, but I'm sure there's something because there's always something. I can't, if you ask me, and I said it in my quick review of the book on like Goodreads and Storygraph and Fable and whatever. I'm in all those places, by the way. Just look me up. I said it in my quick review. This book is about as close to a 5-star as I can ever get. And I don't give out 5 stars, okay? Like, the only books I've ever given 5 stars to in any of these book review platforms is the Little Women series, the Plumfield series, because Little Women is my favorite book of all time. Like, that's the standard that you have to hit to get 5 stars from me. And it's just, it doesn't happen, right? But this book, my god, it's as close as I can get to 5 stars. Like, almost there. I loved it so much. I believe I gave The Sun and the Star a 4.5. This is a 4.75 for sure. Like, I don't even have to think about it. This one is so much better. Like, I love The Sun and the Star, but this one is so much better. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna review the book. I'm gonna go into different aspects of it that I loved, even some little things that I may not have loved. It's gonna be full of spoilers. If you haven't read the book, please go read it. Like, go get it right now. You need to have this book in your life. But once you're done with that, then you can come back and watch this review, because if you stick with it before having read the book, it's going to be spoiled for you really hard. Like, I'm gonna be reading quotes. Like, you don't want that. So please go read the book and then come back and watch this video. It'll still be here. It's fine. And I'll probably be sitting here for a long time because I have a lot to say, but it is what it is. Alright, so I'm going to start with some general observations, right? For the first half of this book, the story feels like how the senior year adventures books, like the ones that are currently following Percy trying to get like his letters of recommendation for New Rome University. That series is called The Senior Year Adventures, and for the first half of this book, it sort of felt like how the senior year adventures are supposed to feel, but they don't really. They're supposed to be like a smaller adventure that isn't, you know, a war or Tartarus or some world-ending event, but it's just kind of a side story following the everyday life of a specific set of characters, except, you know, they're demigods, so their everyday lives are pretty extraordinary for us mere mortals. And that's what I was feeling like for the first half of this book. And that's not like snide or anything. I love that. Like I said, like by the halfway point, I was already saying, I love this book. This is the best book Rick has ever written. So that's not like a snide remark about it. I like that. But then this book takes a turn. It's like, bam, you are hit with the stakes. And they are, let me tell you, they are quite high stakes for what was originally supposed to be a simple side story. I really was impressed by how huge this thing became. And, you know, I like the Nico Adventures series, and I think this series, the Nico D'Angelo Adventures, is going to have massive repercussions for future Camp Half-Blood Chronicles books, especially this book. Like, I think the stakes of this like side series of side stories is so much bigger than the senior year adventures could ever possibly like get to. I'm sorry, Percy not going to university would be, pretty tragic, but not break the mist, destroy the underworld tragic, right? So like, I think this thing hit really high stakes, and it didn't even feel that way at the beginning, so I have to give Mark and Rick massive kudos for that. And the other thing about the senior year adventures is that they feel very middle grade. Even though Percy is not a middle grade student, he's 17, he's almost an adult, he's looking into like university level stuff. The way the senior year adventures are written, they still feel very for kids. Like, just the type of jokes, the plot lines, just the tone of it is very light. That is something that I, on the one hand, like, because that is what Rick started out for, like, doing. But at the same time, I am one of those people who feel like you have to grow up with the characters. And I understand why Rick doesn't really want to do that, because his audience is middle grade, right? So, like, that's who he's writing for, and that's totally fair. So he's gonna keep the tone consistent. He's gonna keep the characters, like, pretty recognizable throughout. Like, they change, but they don't change that much, right? But for me, personally, I prefer to grow along with the characters. Rick completely ignores the passage of time, and that's fine for him, but for me, I wish he had more. And that is something that sort of holds me back from enjoying the senior year adventures a little bit more, is that they feel very for kids, and I am a grown-ass adult, right? They're still good books, I don't not like them, but I wish they could be a little bit more mature. This series, and especially this book, feels so much more mature than the senior year adventures do. And I think it's because Nico as a character has gone through so much in his life, and he has such a deep, like, interior life, unlike Percy. Percy's a lot more about, like, what's happening outside of him. He doesn't really, like, think, like, interiorize things too much. He's not that kind of guy, and that's fine. He can be that. It's fine. But Nico is a lot more interior than Percy is. So just because of those two things, this series just feels so much more mature, and this book specifically feels so much more mature. I have never really thought of Nico as one of my favorite characters. I love Nico as much as the next fangirl does. He's great. He's fantastic. I love him. But I've never really considered him one of, like, he wouldn't make my top 3. My top 3 are Will, Percy, and Thalia. But Nico, there's something about Nico. Because of his background, because of everything he's been through, and because of the way he processes everything that happens to him, there's something about Nico that just immediately, by us following his point of view, immediately brings, like, a level of gravitas to the book that other points of view don't have. And I think that's it's very telling, because, again, Nico's not my favorite character, but the books that center around Nico, or the books where Nico is a very significant sort of point of view character, those books tend to be my favorite. Like I mentioned before, you have the Titan's Curse. It's all about the D'Angelo siblings. House of Hades is very much about Nico and what Nico's going through. And I think that definitely you can feel it in this series. And it's just, it makes for a completely different experience than reading all the other books. One thing I like about these books is that I feel like this one especially almost harken back to, like, the early books in the Percy Jackson series, not in the middle grade tone, but, like, maybe even just The Lightning Thief, but, like, books that felt more about the theme than about the plot. And, of course, there's a plot for sure. There's always a plot with Rick, and, twists that you don't expect and characters like advancing and whatever. But this one just feels that like it's more about the lesson that Rick wants his readers to learn than about the events themselves. And I like that because the early Percy Jackson books were all about learning. And learning especially that just because people are different doesn't mean that they're less than. And this book was so very much about that. But also, it touched on the idea that there's no such thing as an invariable nature that defines who we are and how we act. We don't have to follow nature. We have free will. We decide what we want to be. And that is so very topical these days. I'm just gonna leave it in a general sense. But yeah, that is an important lesson to know these days. And obviously, I'm an adult. I already know these things. But I think it's a good lesson for the kids who are just picking up this book now. It took me back to those early Percy Jackson books because Heroes of Olympus and certainly Trials of Apollo didn't really feel like that. They felt more about the plot. They had lessons obviously in there, but they felt more about the plot. So I for one appreciate that, and it's a little bit of why I really like this book. Now I'm gonna talk a little bit about the writing and the plot. The one issue, and the biggest issue I have with this book, is that unlike in The Sun and the Star, we don't get Will's point of view at all. And as I said before, Will is my favorite character in this entire universe that Rick has created. So I was kind of sad about that because I love seeing Will's point of view. I was so happy to see it in The Sun and the Star. But on the other hand, like, what we get to learn about him just from Nico's point of view, or even just Will's own actions, was so amazing to me that I really, really can't complain all that much. Like, I have a theory, I'll touch on this later, but I have a theory about Children of Apollo and ADHD. And I feel like this book answered so many of my questions about that theory. I really, really love that. Also, and I just have to say, this is a personal side note, but I was so sure that this book was going to joss all my post-Trials of Apollo fanfics. Which, it happens. It has happened to me in the past. It's fine. I adjust. I recalibrate. It works. But I am really attached. I'm really attached to my post-Trials of Apollo Angelo fanfics, particularly because I love them. So like I was like crossing my fingers that it wouldn't just completely throw those fics in the trash. But here's the thing, not only it hasn't just them, I think it's actually like confirmed them in a way. I mean, like there are things like, oh, Hazel being a huge Angelo shipper, but like we all saw that coming. That, Nico and Will becoming demigod leaders, this is very important to me. Will practicing archery because he needs to practice because he's not good at it. Or even just Will sort of getting used to the Cocoa Puffs and quote-unquote adopting them. Like, these are all things that I have written about. Rick even, included a mention of fritelle. Which... What? Like, I used that in one of my... I'm beginning to wonder if they actually read my fics. That's a joke. I know they're not reading my fics, but like, obviously I'm not the only one who's thought about fritelle, but it's like most likely a coincidence, but it did make me squeal. I am so happy because I feel like I read the room right, and I knew where they were going. And I saw it, and they saw me, and I'm like, I feel seen. I don't know, it's just fangirl things, it happens, but I'm very happy that my beloved post-Trials of Apollo Angelo fics still stand, mostly. Now, here's a funny thing, I am an editor and a professional beta reader, and one thing I often tell my clients when I'm like reading their manuscripts and giving them feedback is that if you're going to introduce a new point of view very late into the book, don't. Most of the time it feels like it came out of nowhere, and it might even come across as like jarring or too convenient to the reader. It's like, oh, I need to see what's happening with these other characters. I'm just going to introduce another point of view, even though I haven't done any of the work to show me before 3/4 of the book how this person even thinks, right? Like, it comes out of nowhere. And Rick's books are either like they either stick to one point of view, or they have several points of view, but they're distributed evenly, like in Heroes of Olympus. And I remember in The Sun and the Star, he introduced Will's point of view relatively early, like I think it was like chapter 10 or so, which was fine by me, because we still had then the book coming back to Will every once in a while in later chapters. So that wasn't bad. Here, in this book, we don't see Hazel's point of view until we're about 2/3 into the book. And I want to be annoyed. I really do. But I can't. Because I think exceptions happen. They're few and far between, but they do happen. And I think it was actually very clever to hold off on seeing things from Hazel's point of view until after we already know she's not dead. Because, well, at that point you need her point of view, obviously, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to see what's happening with the captured mythics. But at the same time, I do feel, because we all sort of suspect that he's not going to kill Hazel and she's alive, and she basically like says it, like, don't believe that I'm dead. So you lose that like element of surprise, but then introducing her point of view makes it feel more jarring. Like that feeling I said that this came out of nowhere, that jars the reader when it happens. And I think in this case, it was very useful for the reader to be jarred by this point of view shift, because it feels abrupt. It like there's been an abrupt change, like the stability that we'd had in the book up until that point sort of tilted. You know what I mean? And I feel like that feeling actually adds to the unsettling quality of the plot twist. It's like, okay, Hazel's not dead, but like she's still, like there's still something happening that is changing things. And I thought that was really clever of Rick and Mark, which goes to show, you know, there are some rules that you follow, but if you break a rule and it works, it works. So that's interesting. I also wanted to say, like, the biggest part of me loving the stakes of this book was the idea of breaking the mist. I think that is genius. I think that is genius because I don't know if you remember, and I don't want to talk about the franchise that should not be named, but there's a point in that franchise. You know which one I mean, I'm sure. I know you know which one I mean. But there's a point in that franchise, specifically in the last book, where we start seeing how the events happening inside the magical world are starting to bleed into the outside, and how dangerous that is. And I feel like Percy Jackson has not really done that. There's a point in The Last Olympian when the battle just takes over Manhattan, right? But after that's over, like we see the demigods interacting with the mortal world during battle. We see mortals all around because they're just asleep, right? But like after that happens, after the battle is over, things just go right back to normal. And that is because of the mist, right? Rick has constructed this world in a way that is completely insulated from the mortal world. And like they say even in this book, like people will find ways of like interpreting odd things that happen to them in ways that they feel are rational. And that's basically what the mist does. But the mist has always been there. So like there's no chance whatsoever for these things to really bleed out in a permanent way. And I think that's the biggest danger that there is to this mythical world of demigods and monsters. That's the real danger, right? Like if the mortal world finds out that this is a thing that really exists, it would change everything. But Rick hasn't really touched on that because obviously, that would make it almost like post-apocalyptic fiction. I don't think that's where Rick is going, but I like the suggestion in this book that it can happen. And what a freaking disaster it would be. I think that is genius. I think that might be the most dangerous thing they've ever faced. And yet, it's happening in a side story. Like, it just blows my friggin' mind. I also really like the idea of the Tesseract. Because it's just way more convenient. It's like demigod cell phones, kind of. I know that people in fanfic always have like, Leo invent a monster-proof cell phone or whatever. Rick doesn't want to go there. He doesn't want to give them cell phones, guys. He just doesn't want to. So I think the Tesseract works. And I think it was actually kind of pretty funny how it was introduced. Like, they really thought about this. Funny thing is that Semele's identity I saw coming from the get-go because I remember her name. Actually, one of the novels I'm writing, it's a reinterpretation of the ancient Greek pantheon in modern time, right? So it's basically like Succession. It's not Succession. I'm not right. I haven't seen Succession. I don't even know what Succession really is. But it's like, it's this huge family. It's a huge messed up family. Because Zeus is an actual pig. But he's just a man in this one. And everybody in his family are just people. And because I've been preparing to write it, I actually looked into like who everybody's mothers are. So like I had Semele fresh in my mind when I heard the name, and I'm like, hey, I know her. Isn't that Dionysus's mother? Right? So like I knew. I left the door open that maybe there was another Semele somewhere in Greek mythology, and it may not be her, the one I'm thinking of, but like I was pretty sure that was her. Also, Naomi's appearance I saw coming since Will mentioned that she was having a concert in San Francisco. It was pretty obvious. Will killing a harpy with a wool sock caught me by surprise. Like, completely by surprise. Because I had totally forgotten about that one small conversation way back in the beginning of the book. Like, at this point, I could not, like, it had vacated my head. And my god, I loved that moment so freaking much. It's like, it felt like Blue Hairbrush 2.0. That's what it feels like. I loved it so much. Okay, now I'm gonna talk about the humor. First of all, this book was so funny. Like, most of the passages that I highlighted, that I showed you, that I highlighted in the book, are just lines that I found funny. They're not even Sol Angelo moments. Well, some of them are, but like most of them are just lines that I found funny, and I found them funny in that like bantery teasing way that I love. I laughed so much while I was reading, and I like guffawed out loud so many times. And that is saying something because I did most of my reading for this book while I was at the gym. So I'm sure people passing by must have been wondering who the crazy lady cackling on the treadmill was, What I did like was that there were less like fart jokes and like gross out jokes. If you've read my review for The Wrath of the Triple Goddess, which was Rick's previous book, last book previous to this one. If you've read my reviews of it on Goodreads or Storygraph or Fable, you'll see that kind of humor just annoys me. Like, I get that kids like gross out humor and like poop jokes and fart jokes and vomit jokes and stuff like that. I get it. You can have one or two, that's fine. Why do you have to have so many? And Wrath of the Triple Goddess had so much of that kind of humor, and I just don't find it funny. But in this book, there are far fewer fart jokes. There's still a few in there because, like, you know, every time there's like a small or a pet-like character, Rick just kind of seems to devolve into fart humor, which, you know, honestly makes me wonder about the state of the digestive tract of any of Rick's pets. Because, like, you might want to take them to a vet, man. But even so, even though there were still a few fart jokes in here, specifically from Orcus, it was way less egregious than it was in Triple Goddess. It was almost kind of sweet because then when the other mythics sort of associate the bad smell in the dodecahedron enclosure to Orcus and his farts, it's almost sweet. Because, like, this bad smell is reminding them of their friend who also smells bad, but they miss him anyway. Like, I pretty much had to forgive Rick for the fart jokes right there. Because, like, I don't know how he does this, but he's made fart jokes tug at my heartstrings now. Like, how? I don't know. Now, let's talk a little bit about the characters. First, I'll start with Nico because duh. And I will touch on this again later during the Solangelo section, but a lot of my favorite aspects of this book had to deal with us getting to see Nico be open with other people. Mostly Will, of course, but also Hazel, Semele, Mr. D. Will is right when he says that Nico has changed and grown so much in such a short time. Because even in The Sun and the Star, he was still a bit reticent to open up, like feeling that other people would not understand his darkness. But now he's finally come to a point where he understands that he can be vulnerable around other people and they'll still accept him, they'll still love him, they'll still support him, and sometimes, and realize that sometimes his own thoughts are biased. And having a second point of view on those thoughts might be helpful rather than risky. I think he's like, I think after The Sun and the Star, he really took to the idea that even if other people are different, and even if it feels like they might not understand him, they also might. So it's worth, like, opening up and letting them see why he's thinking the way he's thinking and why he's feeling the way he's feeling. And I think that's so important. And it's such a great show of character growth for Nico. I'll just mention that Nico D'Angelo Disaster Detective sounds like a very fitting subtitle for this series, or alternatively, the title of his memoir. I also really loved that Nico has accepted the chaos of demigod life, because unlike characters like Percy, who would be, you know, perfectly happy to simply have a completely normal life, I don't think that Nico can sort of extricate his demigodliness from his identity. I think at this point, it's such a part of him that I don't think he can, like, separate them. And also, I think Nico's the type who would just get bored of a, like, simple mortal life. And honestly, that's not a bad thing. You know, you want to be extraordinary. And if he can accept it as a thing he lives in, rather than something bad happening to him, I think that's very, very good progress for him. Also, I just want to say that I adore seeing those little glimpses of Nico's past, and I adore that he's able to recall little glimpses of his past, because in case you didn't know, this is also something I wrote in a fanfic. I just think it's really nice. And when we were first introduced to Nico, his memory was wiped, so he didn't know anything other than just Bianca was his sister, right? But I think it's good that we see him start to get his memories back, because I don't want him to go through life not remembering. Like, maybe it's okay that he doesn't remember the worst parts of it, but there were good parts too, right? Like his mother. So I want him to remember the good parts. And while I have yet to use Nico's Nonna in a fanfic, I have not yet, if you look into my list of fanfic ideas to write, and I say look like as a euphemism-ish, because you can't really look into it because it's in my computer, but you get what I mean. But, like, if you could look into my list of fanfics to write, you will see that there is at least one where Nico mentions his nonna, and I just want to state for the record that I had that idea before I read this book. Hashtag nonna the angelo for the win. Also, I really love how much Nico misses his mom. We in the fandom love to make so much noise about Bianca because we saw that happen and we saw him react to it, so we know that better. But I think Nico would miss his mother so much, and especially since her death was so traumatic. But I like the idea of seeing him remember the good things about her rather than just her tragic demise. And when I mentioned that I wrote about Nico seeing glimpses of his past in one of my fanfics, it was actually about his mother that he was remembering. So like I'm very glad to see him thinking more about his mother in this book. And just this is the very end of the book, but hearing Nico say that he's happy, truly happy, is it just makes me happy. It's such a hard-earned, wholesome, inspirational, just lovely thing to see, because no one deserves to be happy more than this kid. Absolutely no one. Like, he may not be one of my favorite characters, but I recognize that if there's any single character in this freaking universe who deserves to be happy, it is Nico the Angelo, and I'm so glad that we finally get to see him say those words. It's so great. Now I'm gonna talk about Will, aka my son baby. First of all, I was so glad to hear Will mention Manhattan, and especially his grief over the loss of Michael, because it still felt a little bit weird because Michael wasn't the only Apollo kid who died that day, I'm pretty sure. They mentioned that the Apollo cabin was the one that lost the most people. That still feels a little bit off to me, but I was glad to see them at least mention Michael, because I think that is a very key moment of Will's life. Like, there's a before Manhattan and there's an after Manhattan. And we see this a lot in fanfic, but we hadn't seen much of it in canon until now. And I thought it was absolutely lovely for Rick and Mark to touch on that. Also, a note, dear Rick, if you're watching this, which you are not, but just in case, now do Lee Fletcher, please. I love Lee so much. I don't know why. He's not even that big of a character. We don't even know all that much about him. But I love Lee, and I had canon that he was sort of like a real paternal figure, or quasi-paternal figure, like real big brotherly paternal figure to Will. I love their relationship. We've never seen them interact. Not really. But like in my head, they have a great relationship, and I hate that nobody mentions Lee Fletcher anymore. I like Michael. Michael is great. But he's not the only Apollo camper who died, okay? Like, Lee was there first. So maybe we deal with that as well. I don't know. And also, you guys, that scene in the Principia where Phil just goes like full freaking Super Saiyan on Lever, like, guys, I think I was on a train when I read that, and I had to fight so hard not to scream. Oh my god, that scene was everything. I loved that so much. And oh god, like, oh, Mark and Richard, what are you doing to me? I don't even understand. Like, you have no idea. I wanted to do a happy dance when I saw that. It's like, how can you be this? But like, you are Will Solace. You are a little sunshiny cinnamon roll who doesn't like to hurt people, who saves everyone he can save. Like, how are you this badass? How is this a thing? And why is it so amazing? I'm so hyped. While on that, I appreciate every variation of Will's sun and sunlight powers. I love the idea that he has some offensive capabilities, even if he can't quite like fight or use a bow and arrow. And personally, I'm not super terribly fond of the plague powers, because it's one of those things that where I feel like it could be so much darker. Like, you say plague powers, you make me think, oh shit, this is tough, right? This is a big deal. But I think it's one of those things that Rick can't use effectively in this series because it's for middle grade kids. So like, Will gives, is it Nyx? He gives Nyx hay fever in The Sun and the Star, but like, my dude, you could have given her Ebola. You know what I mean? Like, it's so wide and so dark, and I don't feel like Will would feel great about it. I mean, maybe hay fever, sure, but like, if he did give someone Ebola by mistake, I think he would like hate himself. So I'm not super into the plague powers thing. I recognize that it's a thing that exists, but I don't need it. That said, that's why I much prefer like this version of the sun and sunlight powers than the one in The Sun and the Star. Not just the plague ones, but also the light power in The Sun and the Star. Because like, I enjoy Care Bear as a nickname just as much as the next fangirl, but shooting light beams out of your belly will simply never be cool. Unless you do it while wearing a spandex superhero suit with the X-Men logo on it. If you get that reference, give me a high five in the comments. And this version of the sunlight powers felt a lot more Sunspot than Havoc. And I love that to bits. I really, really do. And honestly, I'm loving just how smart Will is in this book. Which is funny because he's usually getting all the names wrong. Which is, I find that adorable. But he's also, like, he's really truly quite intelligent as well. He has that whole thing where he, like, has, like, surfer guy vibes. But also at the same time, he's super smart. Right? In his own way. Not just like in knowing random obscure Etruscan gods of health, which of course he would, because it's health. But also, you know, coming up with quite ingenious plans himself. And I especially like just how he grasps the situation about as quickly as Nico does. And that's saying a lot because Nico is very quick on his feet. He's a fighter, so he has to be, and we kind of see that when he's teaching the Roman kids, like, how to fight. Will doesn't fight, but he can still, like, he's still really quick-minded. He understood Hazel's message right away, just as fast as Nico did, and he was able to transmit that to Frank, even before Nico broke out of his stupor. Like, he knew Nico was in no state to do it himself, so he took the initiative, and I love that he does that. I love just how smart he is. He started devising a plan even before Nico woke up. What is this perfection, you guys? I love him. And as a last point, I'm gonna say I absolutely do not buy at all that Will had no idea the Cocoa Puffs had stowed away in his backpack. I just don't buy it one bit. I do not. Rick foreshadowed it. He did. And I think Will was in on it. Because, let's be real, guys. So fucking serious here. We all know who the permissive parent is in this family. we all know, right? So, and you know, I'm it's okay because all's well that ends well. So like, even if he and Nico sort of disagreed on that, they still presented a somewhat united front toward their kids. But then, you know, Will did what he thought was right, so, like, I appreciate that. Now let's talk about Hazel. I like, especially how they dealt with Hazel's feelings of helplessness and her thinking that she's not pulling her weight. I especially liked her line about waiting to be rescued. I don't remember which page it was, but it was there when she was trapped with the mythics. She said that she felt like she was waiting to be rescued. And I think that's a very post-second wave feminist position of her. Honestly, because, yes, we see female characters, we don't want female characters to be damsels in distress anymore. That's not a thing we want to see. But damsels in distress, a damsel in distress is more than just a woman who needs to be rescued. Everyone needs to be rescued once in a while. And it's not about that, it's about how one approaches their endangerment or their imprisonment that matters. Like, whether you display some sort of agency or not. A damsel in distress is a woman whose agency has been removed. Normally by a man, but not always. But even when she's captured, and even when she needs to be rescued, Hazel could never be the stereotypical damsel in distress. She's always doing something. She's always trying something. She always retains her agency, her drive. That's what matters. That's what makes her a strong female character, even when she's not wielding her spada and kicking butt, you know? So I appreciated that. Now, the one thing I wish we had seen from Hazel in this book is that I wanted to see her and Hades interacting. And yes, the thing where Hades can't acknowledge her existence, it makes sense, I guess. But it's been a long time since she came back, and Hades himself said in this book that her coming back to life was fair. So, like, who's to tell the Lord of the Underworld who he can release from punishment or not, right? Like, that was the whole point of this book. He even released Pirithous from Asphodel himself. And we all saw what Pirithous went on to do, right? So why is it so wrong to acknowledge that he also released Hazel to go back to the world of the living, and she's been in there for years, and nothing's really gone wrong. She's only helped, right? That's Hades' decision. So, you know, as much as I love that Nico gets to have a relationship with Hades, and Hades is actually shown to be a decent-ish father to him, especially in this book, he's really one of the best godly parents we've seen, because most of them suck, so you know what I mean? But as glad as I am that Nico gets to have that relationship with Hades, it feels unfair that Hazel doesn't get the same. So, like, I wish, and this is, again, Rick, Mark, anybody else who might write with Rick in the future, if you're watching this video, give Hazel a way to be able to, like, have a father. Please. That would be great. Now, we have to talk about the Cocoa Puffs. I love how integral the Cocoa Puffs were to the plot, because I adore the Cocoa Puffs, and I was half worried that they'd just end up, like, in the background because the authors didn't know what to do with them. That did not happen. The Cocoa Puffs were, like, central to the plot, and so many scenes with them were so great. Like, the van full of emotions scene, so absolutely perfect. That might be my favorite scene in the entire book. I also loved, in particular, the interactions between Will and Grief, the Cocoa Puff, because, again, Will has Grief in his past, and I think Grief is one of the things that him and Nico actually have in common. And I was hoping it would be touched upon, because one of the things I love so much about Will and Nico as a pairing is that they're such opposites, like literally such opposite, to the point where it's like symbolic how opposite they are. But at the same time, it's really their commonalities that make their relationship even stronger. Their desire to help people, how smart they are, and, you know, the grief they've been through. Like, I wrote an entire Medium post about this, so, like, if you can go check out my Medium blog, it's in there somewhere. So I liked that Will sort of got to really interact with Grief, because I feel like that symbolically sort of, like, hints toward that. And loneliness, too, because I do think, like I said, Will has a before Manhattan and after Manhattan sort of split in his life. And I think that the change that happened at Manhattan, where not only did his family die, his siblings die, many of them, but also he had to step up. He was like, what, 12? 13? He had to step up and become the cabin counselor and, like, be there to help all his little siblings through grief when he was just a kid going through grief as well. Like, I think that is probably very lonely. That would have made him feel very lonely. So I appreciated the way he interacted with loneliness as well. Out of all the Cocoa Puffs, Defiance is my favorite. Though, because I can just, like, picture his, like, frowny, glaring little face, squishy face, and it reminds me so much of Nico. Like, whenever I think of Nico, I think of, like, angry face, like Angry Birds face. Like with the little, like the angry little screech owls, which I love using in my fanfics because screech owls are Hades' sacred animal. But they also like remind me so much of Nico. They're so cute. It's so cute. They're so angry. I love them. That's why I love Defiance as well. It's like, yeah, when I think of Nico, that's what I think of. Pretty much. And I'm just saying, Rick, again, I don't know that Rick is actually watching this video. I doubt it. But like, if any of his team is watching this video, which I think should be fine for them, if not for Rick. But like, if any of Rick's team or like the Disney Hyperion people or whatever are watching this video, let me give you an idea, an absolutely brilliant idea for free. Rick should sell Cocoa Puff plush toys as merch. I swear to God, they'd be more popular than Squishmallows. Labubu who? Do it, Rick. I would buy them all. I love them so much. They're so cute. Now let's talk about the adults. And the first and foremost, we have to go see Naomi. I knew it. I knew it since Will mentioned it, that she had a concert in San Francisco, and I knew she was going to come into play, and like the foreshadowing was a little bit obvious, but we finally got to see Naomi Solis, so I will give Rick and Mark a pass on that obviousness. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. And the fact that we get to see her meet Nico for the first time, and she is exactly as warm and welcoming and motherly as we all wanted her to be. It's just so wonderful. And I know it's bittersweet for Nico because his own mom cannot be there for him. But like, I want Naomi to become a second mother to Nico in the same way that Sally's probably become a second mother to Annabeth and like virtually every other demigod that crosses her path. In this house, we are here for supportive mothers. Lord knows these kids need better parental figures in their lives, and I just love, like, I want Naomi to adopt Nico, not in a creepy way because she's dating her son, but like, I want Nico to become part of the family, basically, and I think we're pretty well down that road right now. Also, just the fact that she finds all the demigod mayhem exciting and wants to write songs about everything she sees, like, you can kind of see why she and Apollo would fall in love, right? Like, this, we're talking about the guy who, like, breaks into haiku at random points. You know? Moving on, that scene with Hades and Nico at the Temple of Pluto was everything. It was just everything. Oh my gods. I love it so much. It was so good. And I love that Hades gets to be an actual good parent after everything he and Nico have been through. It gives people, it gives me like hope for people to like improve their relationships as they grow. Small aside, I love that Hades is technically aware and has kind of sort of interacted with his son's future mother-in-law. And you know, now I really want to read like all the fanfics about those two actually meeting for real. Like, I need it. Also, Hecate is very popular these days. I was not expecting Hecate to make an appearance. I literally just read Triple Goddess not too long ago, so like, I wasn't expecting to see her so soon, especially since like they're not in the continuity is not like Triple Goddess takes place like a year previous, I think, or no, like right after Nero or something, before The Sun and the Star for sure, because Percy and Annabeth are already in college during this book, so like it's not like the two things happen like one after the other. It's just that Hecate comes back after a long time. I don't know, it was weird. And I just want to say that I am so tickled pink by the fact that Mr. D is a total mama's boy. I love that. I love it. Now let's talk about the villains. Okay, so the judges in the Court of the Dead aren't the same as the judges of the underworld, which is what I was expecting. But I still love them so much. I I love that Tantalus appeared again, especially since like season 2 of the Percy Jackson TV show is coming up in just like 2 months. And frankly, the dude is a genuine piece of shit, so like he would absolutely join in this, right? Bloody Mary made me chuckle because she was so unexpected, and I really like when I really like when Rick does that, like bring up unexpected people into this world. And Pirithous was hilarious precisely because no one has any idea who the fuck he is. And I love when Rick does stuff like that. Like, it just works. I don't know, it works for me. Plus, I was really kind of fascinated by the fact that Pirithous gave me massive Stephen Miller vibes. And I know they did that on purpose. I don't know why. I kept picturing him as Stephen Miller. I don't know. And I know that they basically, like, do an almost direct comparison with Trump later, like being self-absorbed and whatever, and having this delusion of self-importance. But to me, like, every time I try to picture Pirithous, I just picture Stephen Miller. So it is what it is. They do have that in common, at least. I do feel like the pace slowed down a bit when Pirithous summoned and trapped the gods of trickery. I understand why that needed to be a thing. Like, the narrative needed a way to show the audience that Pirithous' secret weapon and like what it could do. But it really did kind of slow down the urgency we had been feeling up until that point. So that's sort of a pacing thing for me. That said, I do appreciate that Pirithous wanted to go full Prometheus and Hades. When Rick does include the more brutal parts of Greek myth, and there are many of them because Greek myth is like gruesome, man. I do feel like he understandably waters it down a little bit, like the gruesomeness of it, because it has to be palatable to middle graders. You know, like with the whole Tantalus thing in Sea of Monsters. He did say it, but it was almost like funny, jokey, haha, this guy ate his kids. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of incongruous in that way. And even some of the darkest parts of Tartarus still felt like enough, like watered down enough that a kid might be able to not be terrified by it. So I'm glad he didn't shy away from like the eagle thing, like eagles eating Prometheus's internal organs every day. He said it. I don't know what the moms of middle graders are gonna think of that, but he said it. I give him kudos for that. Now let's talk about Angelo. No, but seriously, I feel like Rick and Mark are finally touching on so many of the aspects of Nico and Will's relationship that I've wondered about and I have been waiting to see. Either means I'm thinking more like Rick or Rick is thinking more like me. Although, you know, realistically, I think that's probably more on Mark than on Rick. But like, there's some synergy happening here. I'm just saying. And my favorite part of their relationship here is just how much they talk to each other. Not just like in the flirting and the cute moments, though I love those too, but just in how much they share their thoughts and worries and how well they know each other to be able to tell that the other is stewing on thoughts and worries. Like, Will looks at Nico and knows that there's something going on. Nico checks out Will's actions and knows that there's something deeper going on. I love that. That said, you know, the whole back and forth about blushing, chef's kiss, I love that. And also, like, a little note about the puffs is that Will, of course, is the one we see interacting the most with them, even before it becomes necessary for their plans. Like, even before they have to interact with the puffs for the plan. Will still, like, it's not like Will is, like, dodging the puffs or anything. Nico does mention that at one point fear touched him and Will got terrified. Clearly, Will did not let that stop him from, like, interacting with these beings that are part of Nico, a part of the person that he loves, right? So we do see him interacting with them, like, a few times, and we do see the Cocoa Puffs even flocking to Will and treating him basically like an extension of Nico, kind of, and Will basically treating them like they're puppies. And I was hoping that would be the case. Again, I wrote a little one-shot about that and everything. But, after reading the book, I'm wondering if maybe interacting with the puffs not only sort of elicits emotions in Will, like they do on anyone else, but maybe they're also sort of helping him understand Nico's emotions better, Nico's states of mind better. Since Nico keeps things close to the vest most of the time, it feels like Will interacting with Nico's deepest emotions, even if they're like divinely extracted from him. It feels like that might give Will a better idea of the way Nico thinks and feels, even if Nico doesn't actually say it. So I wonder how much are the puffs contributing to this new understanding between the two, of like where they know what the other is feeling and thinking even before they say it, right? The fact that by the end of the book, and like we don't even really see that much of Will being affected by the Cocoa Puffs. I guess he's just used to them by now. They're just part of his life by now. And I really appreciate that. I had that in my fanfic as well. I hadn't thought about the Cocoa Puffs like causing their emotions, like transmitting their emotions onto people. So I just thought that Will would treat them like puppies or children or whatever. But like I see that going in that direction. Maybe initially they did affect him a lot, but he's gotten used to them and they've gotten used to him. And like they said, maybe that's the way, like transmitting emotions is the way the puffs communicate. And they have learned how to communicate with Will to the point that it's not overwhelming anymore, right? So I really appreciate that. And I think it says a lot about Will's relationship with Nico at the same time. For the second to last part of this review, I just want to read some of my favorite quotes because, again, look at this craziness. Like, I have so many quotes and moments that I just really, really loved. And I'm not going to read them all, but I will read some of them because I think they hit me very hard. And I really like them. First, there is this quote by Asterion. He says, "Names have power, little demigod." And that quote I like because it reminded me of the Dresden Files. It's another series that I read. But generally, just because names having power is such a fantasy/mythology trope, like just think back to like Rumpelstiltskin, right? Like names have power, and I really love that Rick also like embedded that in here. Then we have this little bit when Will and Nico are training the Roman demigods, Yasin and Daeon. And it goes like this. "Fear is natural," said Will. "All demigods experience it, and when it happens, I try to tap into it. What should I be paying attention to? What makes me truly afraid?" Yasin kept his eyes fixed on Nico's blade. "I thought we were training so we wouldn't be afraid." Nico chuckled. "I promise I'm not trying to sound like a know-it-all, but if there's anything I've learned lately is that you can't stop emotions from bubbling up. So as much as I'd like to never feel pain or fear, they're both going to happen." "That is what we're training for," added Will. "How to deal with the unexpected when it happens." I love this moment because it's one of the first times we see in the book Nico and Will being mentors to younger demigods. That is something that is very important to me. I'll talk more about it later, but like it's definitely like I definitely saw them becoming camp leaders. Like even back in Trials of Apollo, you could see that that's where they were going. Like becoming a new form of Percy now that Percy's moved on. And I really, really like that, and I love seeing them do that in this book. Here's another one. Mr. D smiled. "I remember those days. I used to joke with Chiron that you were a feral child and we were the first civilized people you'd ever been around." Nico says, "Are you saying I was like a wolf?" And then Mr. D says, "No. More like, what's that other territorial pack animal? A nerd." That was just so funny. It's like, as a nerd, I can't relate. Like, we're definitely territorial pack animals. And I appreciate Rick saying that. I love that. Then when the mythics are talking to the demigods and explaining the situation, Johan says, "This may be difficult for you to understand, but I should do that with like a British accent. This may be difficult for you to understand, but we mythics often see and hear things while we sleep. Sometimes these experiences are quite vivid. We call them dreams." The demigods all looked at one another like, who's gonna tell him? It's so funny. It's so funny. See, that's the kind of humor I like. That's my kind of humor. Thank you, Rick. I'm starting to get the feeling that it was more Mark than Rick, but we'll go with it. Whatever. Then we get to the first, like, real Soul Angela moment that stuck with me. I mean, there were more before this, like, let's be real. But this one really, really hit me. Nico says, "There's more going on though, and I can't piece it together." "Then it's a good thing you're not doing it alone." Will smiled, hefting his backpack of endless supplies. "And I've got Kit Kats." Nico's heart fluttered. A couple of years ago, he could not have imagined having an actual boyfriend. It hadn't even been a dream of his. He never dared to think that someone would stick with him through so many experiences like this. And yet here, that someone was, ready to accompany him on every twist and turn of his journey. It was going to be a long, nerve-wracking night, but in that moment, Nico let Will be the balm to his scattered soul. The promise of Kit Kats didn't hurt either. Oh, it's so beautiful. I love them so much. Then we get these little moments. Savannah had spent much of her watch talking over the Iris network with teams who were having trouble, offering Tessera tech support. "No, you don't have to shout. Yes, just whisper the name. No, please don't reply all. Have you tried taking the bracelet off and putting it on back again?" Listen, I'm an adult. I work, like, I'm in academia, so I work with emails all the time. Like, this feels so real. It's so, like, Rick, did you have to, like, oh my god. It's so funny. Then there's this little bit of Will interacting with the cacodemons that I really, really loved. Will had unrolled his sleeping bag next to Nico's. He lounged on his side like a true Roman, although I feel like Greeks did that too. Whatever. Like a true Roman, absently scratching Grief's antlers while the cacodemon cooed with approval. By the end of the night, Nico figured either Will would be overcome by Grief, or Grief would be overcome by Will. I think it was the latter. I'm just saying. Like I said, I think Will and the cacodemons are coming to an understanding of each other, so they don't affect him as much anyway. Because they see him as an extension of Nico, basically. And then, just like a page after that, Nico was about to suggest taking a walk around the archive just to stretch their legs, when the whole room went cuckoo with Cocoa Puffs. I have been waiting for Rick to use that line since The Sun and the Stars. Like, you have to, right? You have to. Now, you know what I love? I love Scooby-Doo. You know what I love even more? Scooby-Doo references in Percy Jackson. Like, seriously, this line. "She would have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for those pesky Cocoa Puffs." Guys, I laughed so loud, and that's saying something because, again, I was literally in the gym. Like, thanks for that, Rick. And then there's this bit, like a page later. Nico's mouth twitched up in a half smile. "Well, gang, I think in the mystery business they call this a clue." Can you not hear the jinkies in the background? I hear it. Perfection. Also, in that same page, I just want to say that Laverna Shirley's made me laugh so loud too. Oh god. And also, I consider that a confirmation that Nico does not know 1970s sitcoms. Though, you know, I guess the camp is full of, like, Gen Alpha kids at the moment, so it's not like somebody would have explained Laverne and Shirley to him. Actually, if you think about it, most of these characters are actually, like, cusp millennials. It's just that Rick is allergic to the linear passage of time, so whatever. They should know. I feel like they should know. I know. I'm I'm a millennial. Well, whatever. But Nico does know Scooby-Doo, so I love him for that. This one is a serious one. I have existed for 3 millennia, Samuel said. Anytime someone says they're putting the world to rights, they are not. That one hit me really hard. Because, you know, she says putting the world to rights, but you know what that reminds you of, right? Make whatever it may be great again? Yeah, they know what they're doing. This book, man. And this might be my favorite line of the entire book. I glow, I heal people, and I know things. That's what I do. That line is going on all my social media bios as soon as possible. I'm just saying. In comes Nico with the badass one-liner. I'm the Ghost King. You don't scare me. God damn. Oh, he's so cool. Then this is another beautiful, beautiful Sol Angelo moment. Will cried, Nico, look at me. He couldn't. He feared that once he looked at his boyfriend's face, his entire world would shatter. He heard Hazel crying nearby. The smell of cinders cloyed his nostrils. Asterion was gone. Gone. Nico, please. Will cupped Nico's jaw with his good hand and gently turned his face. Will's eyes swam with tears, but there was a fierce determination in them, a light that refused to go out. We will get out of here, he said. Believe it. This is one of my favorite things about this book. I mean, we all knew that Will was an incredible optimist, right? Like, he's always trying to see the good in things, in people, in situations. We knew this, right? But we really, really, really see it in this book, and I thought that was fantastic. One quick one from Hazel. Because if Pirithous is telling the truth about this prison, we're in a sealed box with limited vegetation and more mythics arriving all the time. Meaning? Asked Dariel. Eventually, Hazel said, we're going to run out of oxygen. I love this twist. It might not have been that big of a deal to most people, but I really love this twist because I watch a lot of procedurals and mystery shows, and sealed box mysteries are great. Not even just like single room mysteries, but like sealed box when a person is like locked in the trunk of a car or in a sealed container or whatever where the oxygen is running out. Oxygen running out is one of the best timers you can possibly have in a mystery. It's just it immediately just makes you, like, ramps up the anxiety right away, because we all can feel that anxiety, right? We all know what it feels like to not be able to breathe through different circumstances, and we know how excruciating it is, so you know it's really freaking urgent to find these people, and I love that. This one about Pirithous is the one that I was talking about before. Pirithous' fatal flaw is self-importance. He believes he's much grander, more powerful, and more deserving than he actually is. He's a fool who expects the world to cater to him, and he complains of injustice when it does not. Does that remind you of someone? But that's not the end of the line. So, I shouldn't take him seriously? Nico asks. I didn't say that. Hades' tone turned grave. Fools can be dangerous, especially if they convince others of their importance. Damn. It's like bomb. You know what I mean? Like, wow. This book is something, you guys. It's something. Another good one from Asterion. I believe all cages are meant for breaking. Good lesson. Good lesson. This one's gonna be a little bit longer, but I love this scene so much I had to read like almost the entire thing. Meanwhile, Naomi hummed cheerfully as she drove them over the Bay Bridge. Nico imagined she was coming up with lyrics for a new hit song, Vanload of Emotions. Orcus whimpered. I don't like this feeling. Can I have someone else's feeling? That's just jealousy making you feel jealous, Nico said. It'll be worth it, I promise. He opened his bomber jacket to check on Defiance, who puffed up and glared at him like, yeah, I'm still here. What are you gonna do about it? I love the little puff. Wow, said Yasin. Your puff has so much personality. I'm kind of ashamed of mine. That's because you're holding shame, Will pointed out. From Yasin's pouch, Shame hissed in reprimand. Meanwhile, in the back seat, Lavinia wept as she held Sadness. Lucius Silver apologized profusely since he was holding Guilt, and Frank just stared out the window sighing. I miss Hazel, he said as he cradled Longing. It's so funny. It's so great. I love it. I can just see it so clearly in my head. Oh god. This is a quick one that I also really liked. It's a more serious one. They look exactly like Truth and Honesty, Laverna muttered. The only way you can tell the difference, she gestured at their spindly floating legs, is that this pair can't stand on their own 2 feet. Damn. That's a good line. It's a really good line. Quick one from Will. Will, who wasn't so up-to-date on Latin commands, looked confused for a second and then added, yeah, what they said. He took up a position next to Savannah and got ready to glow, to heal, to send some arrows flying, or to throw Kit Kat bars, depending on what was required. I like that line because the way he goes like, yeah, whatever he said, kind of reminds me of Percy. And I know that I, like, as a Angelo shipper, I shouldn't want Will to be with Percy. But, like, I can see things in Will that I'm like, oh, so maybe Nico liked this in Percy too. You know what I mean? Like, there's certain aspects of their personality that they have in common. Like the whole, you know, surfer boy kind of himbo persona. That I would think Nico would appreciate in both of them. And I really like that. Because it doesn't, like, just because Percy's not his type doesn't mean that Percy doesn't have anything that Nico might like about him. You know what I mean? And a lot of it is also in Will. And that doesn't mean that Will is a replacement for Percy. It just means that Nico likes people who are, like, bubbly and outgoing. And that's great. Now that I mention it, I have a video that I recorded, like, last year where I do an analysis of the MBTI personalities for the Percy Jackson characters, or some of them at least. I have not yet posted that video, but I think I'm going to post it when we get a little bit closer to season 2 coming out in December. I'm going to post that one. I still think it applies, but I really feel like after doing that analysis of everybody's personalities, I can kind of see those aspects where Will and Percy might be similar that Nico might actually be drawn to. I'll go back to this one because I skipped it. Real quick, another Slangelo moment. Nico was okay with dying if it saved his friends, but he also saw the pain in Will's eyes. He knew he couldn't leave him like this, not if there was any other way. And I really love this because we all know Nico's been, like, super reckless before in his life. It's not like he was trying to die, but he thought giving up his life for the sake of saving the world and saving other people was worthy. It was a worthy goal, right? So he thought that would be a good way to go, and, like, there's no one here waiting for me or who would be sad for me, so, like, it wouldn't even matter, right? I like that he now has Will. Not as somebody he's necessarily leaving for, because, like, you can't live for other people, but now he knows that if he's gone, Will would be hurt. Will wants him here. Will wants him by his side. And I think that is a good thing for Nico to know, because it anchors him to life, essentially. And one last quick quote, thanks to Orcus: I am small, but I am powerful. And I like this quote because, I don't know, you can't tell because I'm sitting, but I am really tiny. I am a tiny person. I'm like 4'8" or 4'9". I'm really tiny, okay? So, like, every time somebody talks about being small but still being great, I appreciate it. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Mark. I love you. Great book. Let's just move on to the last few sections so I can, like, be done with this. How long have I been talking? Jesus Christ. Okay. Now I want to talk about some theories. So, theories, like, about this book and for the future. I vaguely mentioned at the beginning of this review, like, 17 days ago, that I've long had a theory about Apollo kids and ADHD. It's sort of a personal headcanon of mine because Apollo is the god of everything but the kitchen sink, And that kind of hints to me that he can't focus on one thing for too long. He has to do all the things, right? Therefore, I've always suspected that Apollo kids might, out of all the demigods, be the most prone to the AD part of ADHD, like the attention deficit part. And that was mainly because I felt this way mainly because I feel like Will demonstrates a lot of those traits, but also I feel like he demonstrates them in a more organic way than Percy does. Like if you read my review for Wrath of the Triple Goddess, you can see the comments I make about Percy's ADHD in that book, because it feels very like on the nose. You know, like this is me, Rick Riordan, making an analogy or making a reference to ADHD. Will's ADHD doesn't feel like that, but you can very obviously see that he does have it, right? And, you know, I still believe that about Apollo kids in general, but like having now met Naomi, I'm wondering if maybe that's why Will seems like way more ADHD than even the other Apollo kids. You know what I mean? Like maybe he gets it from both sides. It will make sense. And it might explain a lot, actually. And it's interesting because we were initially introduced to Will as this pretty, like, chill person, right? Like, what was that, back in The Lost Hero or something? A very chill guy. And now I'm wondering if maybe we could interpret that as an attempt at masking, or maybe even a technique that he used to focus better on the important things rather than, like, being all over the place about everything. And I like the idea that now that we've gotten to know him much better, we're sort of seeing beyond the mask, beyond the chill, and at the realist version of him. And not only us, but like Nico as well. So I feel like that would be an interesting topic to explore. So, you know, if you write fanfic, maybe try that. Now, I doubt Rick is ever going to get this far because like I said, he's allergic to the passage of time. But I am definitely picturing a future now where Nico and Will actually stay at Camp Half-Blood into adulthood, and like maybe when Mr. D's punishment is lifted, Chiron takes over as camp director, and then they split Chiron's current duties between the two of them. And like Will can go to med school in the city, and Nico can go to university or not. Whatever. He doesn't like to read, we know that much. And I think it'd be a nice life for them, and they're good at being camp leaders. I feel like Percy doesn't mind, but I feel like Percy accidentally falls into a leader position. I don't think he's as much of a mentor. Like, he's not organized enough for that. I think Will and Nico are much more intentional mentor figures for the other demigods. So I think they would do great as like permanent camp leaders. I kept feeling, as I read, that Rick was setting up storylines for later. For example, with the fact that so many demigods are suddenly popping up at the camps, and I don't think that's just because there are less monsters now. I feel like that's its own thing. And also, the Tartarus patch at Camp Jupiter, like, that has to come back at some point, right? We didn't even really use it in this book. That has to come back. So I smell more story coming, and while I hope it is in this series, because, you know, I always want more Nico and Will, never get tired of that, it wouldn't surprise me if he's, like, gearing up for, like, a whole new big one. You know what I mean? Like, a whole new pentalogy. Because I felt like the stakes in this book were way higher than I ever expected them to be. And I like that. And I think there's a reason for that, and I think it's because Rick is trying to build onto something. Admittedly, the ending of this book does feel like a very final ending for the series, if that's what this is. So, like, I still think Rick is setting up for more, but if this is the last Nico D'Angelo adventure we get, like, individual book about Nico, then it's a lovely ending, so I can't really complain. But I do think, Rick will be in his grave and he will still be writing these characters.
They're gonna make him do this till he's 90.
Till you're 90.
So, like, I fully expect him to be setting up something else in the future. I'm just saying. And yeah, that's pretty much my review for The Court of the Dead a Nico the Angelo adventure, aka the best book in the entire Camp Half-Blood Chronicles. You guys, this book is so great. It's so amazing. I love it. And everybody should read it. That's about it. That's it. I will just go back to my cave and keep working on my Angelo fanfics because what is life? Anyway, I hope you guys stick with me for other reviews. Like I said, I fully expect to finally edit and upload that other Percy Jackson video around the time the second season premieres, so be tuned for that. As always, I'm just really busy, so that's why I haven't been posting more often in the channel. But, you know, if you have any ideas of stuff that you would like me to talk about, stuff like this, things that you know that I love, then sure, just give me a comment in the comments below, and we'll see if I can find the time. In the meantime, you know, you can find me on social media. These have all changed, so I'm just gonna list them. I am Girls Are Weird on Tumblr, and I am CPNIAD. You can find it in the, I know it's hard to parse if you don't speak Spanish, but you can find it in the description. I am at CPNIAD, at Spoutable, Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram. I don't use them all that often, but you know, it is what it is. I am no longer on Twitter. You can still find facebook.com/FreakingNarnia. I just haven't posted there in like ages, but it's still there. And as usual, be sure to visit my main website at FreakingNarnia.com for any and all of your editing needs. I do developmental editing, I do Spanish English translation, I do proofreading, beta reading, and science consulting. So if you're an independent author and you are on the hunt for any of those services, FreakingNarnia.com, and we'll talk. I'd be glad to help you make your manuscript the best it can possibly be. Like this book, because it's so good. I know I've said that 1,000 times, but I really do need people to go and read this book. Okay, that's it. That's it for me today. I will shut up now because my voice is running out. I will see you guys next time in another video from all the way in freaking Narnia. Bye, everybody.